All right, Josh, I'm a little nervous about this next little mini-series we're doing here.
You and me both.
We have every right to be nervous, but we've been doing a series on teaching biblical masculinity. Today, we're changing gears, and we're talking about teaching biblical femininity to our daughters in the home.
This might be the first topic I have literally zero experience with.
Well, yeah, you are the father of three sons.
Three sons.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
we never. I would have loved a daughter. We have girl dogs, and we sometimes think of them a little bit as our daughter. But I know that's different. I never like. There's a part of me that is legitimately a little bit sad that I never got to experience the version of my wife.
Yeah.
Who got to be putting pigtails and bows and things in my daughter's hair the way that she loves to do with our little girl dogs.
I guess you got to use what you got, right?
You got to use what you got.
Yeah. I mean, so I've got 2 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, when we're recording this podcast, I'm going to be getting on a plane in a few days with my youngest daughter and going up to see my oldest daughter, who just gave birth to her 4th child and my 5th grandchild.
Congrats.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to seeing her. I love my girls. They're wonderful. The funny thing, I had someone say to me years ago when I was early on, they said, you know, you right-wing Christians, of course, I'm immediately loving that categorization because it's such a pigeonhole.
And it's so nice.
You evangelicals, you believe that your wife belongs in the kitchen wearing an apron, barefoot and pregnant. And I looked at them and I said, have you met my wife? And today I would say, have you met my daughters? My oldest daughter is one of the most successful businesswomen I've ever met. She makes more money than I do.
Good for her.
And she has been through horrible things. She's been to hell and back. And she's most resilient young, I call her my warrior princess. My other daughter, she's got some issues she's had to overcome her entire life. She still lives with mom and dad. She is one of the hardest workers I know. But one thing neither one of my daughters would be called is weak. They are not weak. They're feminine, but they are not weak. They're girly girls, but they are not weak.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, often the media, I don't think the media has really ever gotten it right when it comes to how they portray women. In the early days of television and radio, and even in a lot of written literature, women are these vulnerable, shrinking violets that, you know, you read a lot of antebellum literature, the Scarlett O'Hara, Gone with the Wind.
Yeah.
They're always swooning.
They need protection.
They're fainting at the slightest offense. Yeah. And you see that even back into the middle, a lot of it was just because, and I think this is true all the way back to the days of the Bible, there were just some fundamental sexist, harsh, toxic masculinity directed toward women.
It's not like it's ever been like good for women.
No, I think that's one of the things that Jesus said is a wonderful example for us that we often underlook.
He was like the first feminist in a lot of ways.
In ways, by today's definitions, I think.
He treated women equally. He would sit down with women and talk with them in a way that you weren't supposed to at that time and just treated them like other people.
Exactly. And I don't think it's, you know, any coincidence. I think it was intentional. First people at his grave, women.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And that's like an important part of the story. Like, because at the time, women's testimony, you couldn't have court testimony.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that God recorded that was intentional, I'm confident, as every word would be. But he was telling us about this. And even though I'm, you know, theologically a complementarian in that I believe that there are certain roles reserved for men, certain roles reserved for women, I believe they're in the uniqueness of design as God has created it. It has nothing to do with worth. It has nothing to do with value. It has nothing to do with a lot of the things we've attached to it. It's about order, but not and design, but it's not about worth and value. And so I think we have to be really, really careful that we don't adopt the posture that says, you know, all women are, you know, fixing their husband a martini when he comes home from work, and they're wearing pearls and a clean smock and an apron, and they're bringing out a pot roast with potatoes for dinner.
Constantly need a rescuer.
That's one extreme.
They're doing chores all the time.
Hopefully, if they've ever learned anything from Burrell, is that I hate extremes. The other extreme to that is this hyper offended, looking for ways to exert superiority, if not at least equality, in a way that I think diminishes them. I think it's trying too hard. And it's easy, and I'm really trying to avoid it, falling prey to the characterizations that are cheap and easy, blue hair, piercings, septum piercings. Let's not get bogged down in that, even though those are kind of
Those are going to be like culturally specific to a certain time anyway.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. It's not going to be the same in 20 years.
My tattoo would have been outrageous
When
to
I
a
was a
lot
kid.
of Christians when you were a kid. And I mean, there are still some, but not that many.
So don't take the easy, cheap shot, either direction.
Yeah.
But rather simply say, what would Jesus do? I mean, really, really, what would Jesus do? Well, we know what he did. He talked to the Samaritan woman who was living with the fifth dude sixth dude that she'd been with. She'd been married 5 times. Yeah. And she was a half-breed, and she was a hussy, if I can use a 50s word.
A half-breed? What
well, she was Samaritan. She was half Jew, half Gentile.
Oh, is that what they wow.
Yeah. So she was a half-breed. And that's the way they viewed it. They viewed it in the worst.
Terrible.
Yeah, I mean, they called them dogs. They literally called them dogs. So and so Jesus was saying, "Yeah, I'll take water from you. Yeah, let's talk. Yeah, let's hang out."
Yeah.
And then being at Mary and Martha's house. And really, you got Martha playing the role of the traditional house frau.
Yeah.
She was cooking fried chicken and
doing
making mashed
all that
potatoes.
stuff.
And Jesus said, "Mary, you've chosen the better thing here. Thanks for sitting.
Yeah.
Thanks for talking." And so, as we kind of approach this topic, I really want that to be the emphasis as we discuss, design as much as anything in the role, but I also want us to appreciate it. I want us to see them the way God sees them. Beautiful. I mean, Mary, the mother of Jesus, the restorer of broken women, abused women, exploited people. And then there are warrior women. Deborah, the mighty judge of her people. Jael, who literally nailed a dude's head to the ground with a tent spike. And these are the kind of strong women that I'm talking about. And I married
really
one.
Smart women. Like I've got a woman on stuff. She is so much smarter than me. You think I'm so smart? She is so much smarter than me. And like I know all these women they can use their brains, their minds in these really incredible ways and make really powerful change happen, even if they're not physically strong. Who cares?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. My wife can debate me under the table. I mean, she just absolutely,
and you probably need that. I've got the same thing.
One of the reasons my mom was so excited about me marrying my wife was, and I had dated several girls before, and she was, oh, yeah, how nice. When she said, she said, you need to marry that girl because she will not be your doormat. Yeah. And if you have your way, Dan, you will treat anybody in your life as a doormat because you're so strong-willed. She said, I already saw her stand up to you. She ain't putting up with your stuff.
So, and 40 years later, or whatever
it'll be 41 years.
You are healthier now as a man. Yeah. I think as a result of her, of the things that your mom was wanting, like that actually happened.
Yeah, it actually happened. And the other thing too is I think my daughters are better women because I married a woman like her. Yeah. And yet she's not some kind of, hyper feminist. She's she was a keeper at home. When we got married, she said, "I'll never quit work. We don't want to. We wanted to have children, but she didn't want to be a stay-at-home mom until we had our first kid. And then one day she said, I really want to stay at home. Yeah. So I've worked 2 jobs all my adult life so that she could be a stay-at-home, and she home educated and she did those things, but not because I required it of her, not because, though I agreed with it and I was thrilled about it. That was a choice we made together. I facilitated, but it was started in her heart. Yeah. And I think, again, if you think I'm a perfect husband and I'm the example that how every husband should treat his wife, talk to my wife. She'll correct you on that. But I do think we are works in progress, and biblical femininity is not a bad word. Yes. So that's where we're heading on this. And I think we've kind of talked about the first thing I always want to emphasize is we have to affirm their God-given identity. And we ought to do it early, and we ought to do it often. And I think we can accidentally send a message to our little girls that they're less than if we're not careful. Psalm 139, verse 14 says, "You are fearfully and wonderfully made as long as you're male." No, it does not say that. It says you are fearfully and wonderfully made, period, new thought, hard stop, all right? And the fact that God saw the deficiencies in Adam that he knew would be there. And he said, but I've got a solution for you, Adam, and I'm going to give you the completer.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you what you lack. Somebody that will hold you back in your worst areas and will push you forward in your good areas. And I wish we knew more about Eve.
Yeah.
But I mean, Adam and Eve were the smartest people ever created. They lived for a period of time without any of the consequences of sin and brokenness and fallenness.
That's an interesting thought.
So yeah,
Does that make them the smartest though?
Oh, I think it did. I think they were so fresh out of the mold that and created in the image of God. They're able to fellowship and communicate with God. They were created without the limitations that sin brings upon us for everything from from joy to pain and all the other things that came in.
It makes me think like innocent, like make me like innocent, like maybe even naive, but it doesn't make me think intelligent. Like I hear what you're saying is like they weren't corrupted.
I think that's the easy way to do it because we think a lack of corruption creates naivete like in a part of an innocent child.
Yeah.
But I believe it was something far superior to that.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah. I think that's one of those fun areas which I've overthought that actually led me to better conclusions. I mean, stop and think about this. Adam named all the animals.
Yeah.
That was part of his assignment.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you don't live to be, how old did he live to be? 680 years? However old
Yeah.
You don't live to be that old without gaining some knowledge too. And
That's
we don't know
true.
how old he was when he fell either. So
when as far as like when they bit the fruit, you mean?
Yeah.
Like we don't know how long it was. I've always kind of assumed they didn't make it that long.
Yeah, I did too, because that's the way it's always depicted in the Bible
Like
storybooks.
weeks or months.
Yeah, they look
but
like they'd be
not
about
years.
30. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's because we had just assumed that God fashioned them together
With apparent age.
assuming like a
weren't
young Earth
infants.
creationist model or whatever. We're assuming. Yeah, exactly.
They were mature adults when they were created. Yeah.
Right.
I love these kind of conversations. We'd spend all day long.
could.
Yeah. But in the end, I think that we need to remind both our male children and our female children, particularly our female children, that she has been made in the image of God. Not in terms of her appearance or performance or popularity, but in terms of her virtue and her design and her character. Those other things are nice. They're add-ons. They're gifts. But the intrinsic value she has is because she is the Imago Dei.
Yeah.
She is the completer of man. Yeah. She is a unique creation designed intentionally by a loving God.
Yeah.
Which brings me to the second thing is I think modeling biblical femininity at the home is important.
What does that look like?
Yeah. And I don't know, that looks like the same thing in every generation, in every culture, because, again, it's really easy to want to attempt to put people in pigeonholes and forced models.
Yeah.
But I guarantee you, and I don't know your wife well, but I guarantee you your wife's a lot different than my wife.
Yeah.
I guarantee you I'm a lot different at home than you are at home.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different.
Sure.
So there's a unique dynamic that comes that I think it's part of God's plan that we aren't cookie cutter families.
Yeah.
Because if we were, then we would not have to work at it. We would not have to yield. We would not have to pray together, to be reconciled. All the things that actually build the tendrils of strength within a relationship between two people, it would just be like putting together a puzzle. Oh, this piece fits here. Okay, now let's go to the next piece.
It's like, I think what I hear you saying is like, God made us so different on purpose, that God made us so diverse on purpose, that there can be so many women that are on one end of a spectrum that seem like, at least to our culture, they would be considered very, very feminine. And there are a lot of women who aren't, who are awesome, awesome women. And God did that. If that's part of God's design, is that there's that much personality difference, then it seems like it would make sense, and there's going to be a lot of different kinds of people that are going to work well together and complement each other.
Well, and I also think that's part of the responsibility of marriage.
Yeah.
Because marriage isn't to be lived selfishly.
Yeah.
So part of the responsibility that each of us bring into a marriage is to not think about ourselves more than think about the other person.
Right.
And in a godly relationship where we're thinking about and honor preferring one another, that the husband loves the wife as Christ loved the church, he even gave his life for it.
Yeah.
Is that women submit themselves to the natural leadership tendencies that exist in men and allow him to take the responsibilities before God that God has assigned to him. That doesn't mean you're a doormat. It just simply means that we commit to orderliness and we commit, just like we have to do in a government or in a church. There are times when we don't get it exactly the way we want to, but I'm not in charge. I'm not assigned this duty. And otherwise, we all just ought to live as single people doing whatever we want and never have to engage with other people. Now, we never violate truth. And that's a whole complicated other issue. But at the same time, we need to work toward unity. The Bible says it's a good thing to work toward unity. It's a good thing for people to live in peace. Yes. So when we model biblical masculinity or biblical femininity in the home, what we're also doing is teaching our children by observation. So if we create a lot of rebellion and turmoil and arguing and fussing and shouting and so forth, then that normalizes that kind of behavior, and then more likely our kids are going to not only respond to their future spouses in a similar way, but they will actually respond to us in a similar way. Yep. Many times listen to your kids at their worst moment, and you will hear yourself at your worst moment because they're modeling, or they're practicing what they've seen modeled. So I think it's a great thing when our little girls can see strength with grace, submission with dignity, service with joy, leadership with femininity. And I can't define that precisely like I'd want to, but like, who was the Supreme Court justice when he was talking about pornography? I know it when I see it.
Oh, Justice Potter.
Potter, yeah. So I think
when he was trying to define pornography.
Yeah.
I don't know how to define it, but I know
it when I see it. Yeah, and that's true. There's art, and then there's pornography, and I think there is godly submission, and then there's being a doormat. Yeah. And I can't give you the exact details, but I can tell you I know it when I see it. And there ought not to be a presence of fear. There ought not to be the use of manipulation. There ought not be a spirit of intimidation. Yeah. There ought to be the presence of respect. There ought to be a priority on order. There ought to be a commitment to listening. All of these things, when we model them to our kids, we are setting them up for healthier, happier, longer-term relationships in marriage when it's an appropriate time in their life. So one last thing in this episode, but I also think we ought to celebrate femininity as a strength, not a weakness.
Say more.
Yeah, Proverbs 31, verse 25 says, she is clothed with strength and dignity. Now, Proverbs 31 is often classically considered to be the great chapter on a godly woman, a virtuous woman.
Right.
But again, I think in as much as sometimes when we talk about boys being humble, that creates a spirit of femininity, that when we say that women should be feminine, that it involves some kind of weakness. And actually it isn't. It is a confidence in the design that God has given them that gives them emotional strength, gives them spiritual wisdom, it gives them moral courage, it gives them ethical clarity. That's why the mom's role when children are very young is so important. And you can just watch kids when I would skin my knee or when I would cut my finger, I didn't run to Dad.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got a splinter in my finger, I'd run to Dad. Dad would say, "Where's the knife? I'm going to chop that thing off."
Or what's the problem? Stop crying.
Suck it up.
Right.
Cupcake.
Right.
Mom would, she would.
Your dad. Oh, every once in a while you open up something about your dad, and I'm just like feeling really bad for child Dan.
Yeah. At the same time, a lot of times he was just twerking me. Or
but anyway, yes. Go ahead.
But my mom, she would say, "Oh, come here. Let me see that."
Yeah.
Her voice would instantly go soft.
Yeah.
And she would say, I'm gonna get some tweezers out. I think we can get that out without a needle. All right. Yeah. So let's get some tweezers, and I'm gonna get some Bactine, because remember Bactine doesn't sting or sting.
Yeah.
And she would take the tweezers, and she would go them over a flame to sterilize them, and then she'd say, "Now look out the window and think a happy thought, or let's sing a song." Yeah. And I was 18. No, I really wasn't 18, but I was 6 years old.
Yeah.
And that gentleness that Mom brought me at that moment gave me assurance and reassurance.
Yeah.
And there were times when my mom would say, "This is why we don't use this word. This is why we help others. This is why we don't stare or point at someone who's disabled. This is why we behave this way. And she did it with a gentleness and a kindness that naturally just doesn't drip from a lot of men, and men tend to be more matter of fact or just impatient or whatever. And a lot of times men kind of think in the military, just do it. I said it. That's enough. But moms would be more gentle. And I think that's a part of the balance that we should have, and you would have you would have grace and you would have the law, and the law often showed you how much you need grace,
right.
So and sometimes dad would be by the way, I've seen homes where it's reversed. I've seen where like mom is law and order dictator, she's the organizer, and dad is come on, let's have a good time. And I think there are times when mom is going to have to be aware. For instance, I've been reading some articles recently about the power of roughhousing for children. It helps them develop things in their mind, in their the psychology of their development. So, it's funny. You got a dad and he's holding his little baby the very first time, and he's holding it like it's a carton of eggs that are going to just burst. And am I doing this right? Am I doing this right? And then like by the time they're 2 or 3,
like flinging
he's flinging them onto the bed and they're bouncing off, and then he jumps on them like he's a pro wrestler. And so we get over that pretty quickly. But actually that's good. That's part of letting our kids develop and get that energy out, and to be able to trust their dad and enjoy that. So again, that's why there are these differences. I never saw my wife grab my kids and, helicopter them over her head and throw them into the pool. She just didn't do that. I did it all the time.
Right.
And there was squealing and crying and don't, daddy, don't. And then it was do it again, do it again.
Right.
So these differences we can celebrate. Celebrate the fact you got a dad that plays with their kids. Celebrate the fact that you got a mom who the kids run to and they want comfort from her, and they want to pray over this and put a Band-Aid on it. And I want a Blue's Clues. Well, that's 90s. What is it today? What is it? Baby Shark or whatever Band-Aid and so forth, because godly femininity does involve very strong character traits that the Bible emphasizes. And if you read Proverbs 31, you don't see a weak woman. You see a businesswoman. You see an organized woman. You see an initiator. She made real estate deals, for Pete's sake.
And so like maybe one of the ways that husbands, fathers can do a good job of celebrating femininity as a strength is by, if you're one of these husbands who is, let's say, super the opposite of the comforting one, if your little kid was going to like have an owie, like they're so not going to run to you. Like some of that might be natural, but it could be that like maybe you're too far at that end of the spectrum and you're a little bit too scary, and there's an opportunity to take a look at what is your wife doing when she comforts your kids, and is there anything that you could learn from this and
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think one of the important roles of a feminine woman is to be a moderating voice in the home. Because I could be that way. I could be hard because my dad was hard, my grandfather was hard, the culture was hard. I could have said something like this. I don't remember if I've ever done it. I probably have, if I'm going to be honest. But stop that crying, and we're going to give you something to cry about.
Sure. Yeah. Just like these lines that you've heard and your dad say and stuck in your head.
Yeah. But, there were times when, crying was good.
Yes. Healthy.
And I can remember times when my wife would say to me, you don't have to be a hard butt about this. You don't have to be harsh. What they need right now. And by the way, at that moment as a man, I had 2 responses that could come.
Yeah.
One of them was, don't tell me what to do.
Boom.
Which, was that Jackie Gleason? Remember, again, these old examples, you wouldn't remember. Jackie Gleason was a black and white television show, one of the first sitcoms out in the late 50s, early 60s.
Hearing it reference from Back to the Future or something, I think.
Well, if you're...
yes,
you can look him up on YouTube, he's there. But he was a Miami Beach performer, and he's quite a character, but he would say, one of these days, and he would wind up his fist and he would say, pow, right in the kisser. Yeah. And that was his line, and then everybody would laugh uproariously.
Sure.
But, one of the dangers we have is use these stereotypes to justify all kinds of attitudes.
Yeah.
And he wasn't suggesting you hit your wife in the face, but he said it.
He's kind of implying that at some point maybe it would be deserved.
It was all, yeah, exactly.
And it's coming.
It was always in my arsenal.
It's coming.
Yeah.
It's going to be, it's like, you just got to be waiting. It's
and
like,
I don't want to be some kind of prude that has no sense of humor and sees, hyperbole as inappropriate in every situation.
I'm way into stand-up comedy, all kinds of comedians, as woke as I seem to the average conservative Christian. I'm super into comedy, but still.
I think we can all agree for sure that we're not Jackie Gleason.
Yeah. And we shouldn't be. And we shouldn't emulate
And our family is not a sitcom performed in front of a live studio audience.
Yeah.
The images that we're portraying in our home are models.
Yeah.
And so being mindful of that, I think, will make us more careful in how we engage with each other.
And our kids can be like way more affected than the kids on a written TV show who are actually not affected by all of this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So anyway, we're gonna stop there for today, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in the coming episodes. But I hope that you'll have a conversation. Maybe you ought to listen to this one with your husband or your wife and just talk about, hey, how are we doing in our home? Where can we do better? What are some opportunities we have? And that's really what we're trying to do. We're not trying to tell you how to live. We're trying to teach you how to think and to consider, what does the Bible say, and how can we respond in it in a way that's glorifying to God and it's good for us and those that we live with in our life. So as always, thanks for listening to us at Life Talks. We hope you'll give us some communication anytime, ideas, criticisms, attaboys, you name it, we'll take it. And you can do that at lifetalks@lifecharlotte.com. Until next time, thanks as always for joining us here at Life Talks.